Even though the Chiefs were one of about 6 teams that decided to rest their starters over the weekend, they faced heavy criticism for doing so. Many people were quick to accuse them of intentionally losing to prevent another team from making it into the playoffs. But as we'll see in this video, those accusations are far from the truth. Coach Andy Reid has been making similar decisions for decades, so this is nothing new for him. Now let's dive into the key takeaways from the game. Yes, there were a few important lessons to learn, and there's a lot more to discuss. But first, let's talk about what happened during this Week 18 regular season finale against Denver. The Chiefs had a bit of a rough start. They were delayed in their travels because of the crazy weather in Kansas City. But once they arrived, they had 2 main goals in mind. The first was to keep their playbook under wraps and show absolutely nothing to their future opponents. The second was to get out of there with a healthy roster, and that's pretty much exactly how things played out. Even though they won 38-0, the game didn't matter much to the Chiefs, who had already locked up the top seed. They gave their backups plenty of playing time, sticking to their plan to stay healthy and avoid revealing anything strategic. While this game was a must-win for Denver in order to make the playoffs, the Chiefs had already secured the top seed and a first-round bye, so the outcome didn't matter for them. Because of that, I'm not going to break this game down the way I usually would. It was largely meaningless. However, there are still a few takeaways worth noting. First, there were no regular starters in the game for the Chiefs, at least not in the usual sense. The Chiefs fielded a very unusual offensive line. DJ Humphries played at left tackle, which was important for him as he needed those reps. We'll touch more on him later. Interestingly, rookie Kingsley Sua started at left guard, a position he hadn't played much since he began the season as the starting left tackle before being benched. It's been a bit of a revolving door at left tackle for the Chiefs, as we all know. Moving to the center, Hunter Norad took that spot, while C.J. Hansen played at right guard and W. Morris was at right tackle. As for the interior of the offensive line, Joe Toyne, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith played just one series, a brief 3-play drive before the offense went 3 and out. Tight end Noah Gray played all 4 snaps, while receiver Xavier Worthy only played 1. The rest of the receivers on the field were Juju Smith-Schuster, Justin Watson, and Nico Riggio. Riggio had a solid performance, leading the team in receiving yards and making a couple of nice catches. Peyton Hendershot was next on the receiving list. Peyton Hendershot ended up leading the tight end group by a wide margin in snaps, with Noah Gray only playing 4 and Hendershot taking the rest. In the backfield, running back fullback hybrid Carson Steele was the main rusher, carrying the ball 8 times compared to Samaj P. Ryan's contributions. This left the offense without many key players. No Xavier Worthy, no Noah Gray, and no starters along the offensive line, including Jawan Taylor. The Chiefs were also missing Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, DeAndre Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Kareem Hunt, and Isaiah Pacheco. In short, it was a makeshift lineup, and the focus was simply on surviving the game. Quarterback Carson Wentz went 10 for 17, passing for 98 yards with no touchdowns or interceptions, and he was sacked 4 times. The offense couldn't find a rhythm, never entered the red zone, converted only 1 third down, and got outplayed, losing the time of possession battle 18 minutes to almost 42 minutes. On defense, the Chiefs rested several key players, including Turk Wharton and Mike Dana, while Chris Jones, George Karlaftis, Trent McDuffie, Nick Bolton, and Drew Tranquill were all sidelined. It was clear that the Chiefs weren't worried about the game's outcome, instead focusing on preserving their key players for the playoffs. There was also no Justin Reid in this game, and Shamari Connor briefly played before being listed as questionable to return with a shoulder injury. I'll touch on him later in the video. Essentially, the starting defensive line didn't play, and players like Felix Anudike-Uzomah, Charles Amour, Mike Dana, Marlon Tuipulotu, and Derek Nadi took on most of the snaps. Joshua Uche also saw some time at linebacker, while Blake Lynch, who signed to the practice squad just a week ago, played 25 snaps. Linebacker Cam Jones led all defensive players in snaps, and Leo Chenal had quite a bit of time on the field as well. In the secondary, Nazy Johnson and Joshua Williams took on significant roles at cornerback, and Keith Taylor and Roland Wallace also saw plenty of action. The rookie safety Jaden Hicks stood out, making several key plays and showing that he has a very promising future with the team. As for the performance, the defense struggled, to put it mildly. Quarterback B. Nix had an outstanding game, completing 26 of 29 passes for 321 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions or sacks. The Chiefs' defense simply couldn't stop him, and it was clear they were missing their regular starters. Nix not only dominated through the air, but he also led the team in rushing yards. Cortland Sutton nearly reached 100 yards on the day, while Mims and V followed behind him on the depth chart. V, in particular, had an incredible moment with that wild touchdown catch that bounced off two Chiefs defenders in the back of the end zone. Somehow, he managed to come down with the ball in one of the most improbable touchdown catches I've ever seen. As for Denver's performance overall, they were 4 for 5 in the red zone and converted 10 of 14 third downs. On the two failed third down attempts, they went for it on fourth down and converted both. Meanwhile, the Chiefs' secondary continues to be a bit of a concern, especially in the cornerback room. Outside of Trent McDuffie, Joshua Williams and Nazeeh Johnson played significant roles, but struggled at times, allowing big plays. The Chiefs are likely hoping, and maybe praying, that cornerback Jaylen Watson will return before the playoffs. His 21-day window to return from IR opened up late last week, so it's something to watch. The secondary's vulnerabilities are probably my biggest concern as the team heads into the postseason. In the end, the Chiefs lost 38-0 in a game where the coaching staff took a preseason approach to the game plan. The offensive play calling was extremely vanilla, and it was clear the focus was on resting key players and avoiding injuries, rather than winning the game. When I say the Chiefs' game plan was very vanilla, I mean it very vanilla. They weren't about to put anything on film for Denver, especially since there's a chance they could face them again in the playoffs in just a couple of weeks. Now, Denver did sneak into the playoffs as the 7th seed, but it's hard to imagine them getting past the Buffalo Bills. Still, stranger things have happened. With that said, there are still a few actual takeaways from this game that are worth discussing. Believe it or not, there are some important points to consider: the playoff picture and who the Chiefs are most likely to face, as well as the accusations from Bengals fans and other NFL fans who claim the Chiefs were intentionally throwing the game. We'll dive into all of that and more in just a bit. Despite the Chiefs' 38-0 loss in this meaningless game, there were still a few key takeaways that are worth discussing. One of those is left tackle DJ Humphries. He did a decent job against Denver's talented pass rush. While his PFF grade looks awful, I always find PFF grades to be a bit misleading at times. On defense, the highest graded player for the Chiefs was Blake Lynch, who had only been with the team for 6 days before playing. As for DJ Humphries, I watched every snap he played, and while he gave up a few pressures, I believe the actual number is lower than PFF's 6. I think he gave up 3 pressures and a couple of sacks. Keep in mind, Denver's pass rush is elite, and this game was at Mile High Stadium, which can be a tough environment to play in. On top of that, Humphries is still shaking off some rust after recovering from an ACL injury that had sidelined him in the past. To make matters worse, he was also dealing with a hamstring injury that kept him out for a few weeks. So when you consider all of this, along with the fact that he was playing next to rookie Kingsley Sua at left guard, instead of Joe Toyne, one of the league's top guards, I think DJ Humphries did pretty well. The good news is that his hamstring held up, and he should be good to go for the divisional round of the playoffs. The real question is whether the Chiefs will stick with Humphries and Twan as their starting lineup moving forward. Even though the Chiefs lost a meaningless 38-0 game, there were still a few takeaways worth mentioning. Left tackle DJ Humphries had a solid performance against Denver's tough pass rush. His PFF grade is pretty low, but I find those grades a bit misleading sometimes. For example, Blake Lynch, who had only been a Chief for 6 days, earned the highest defensive grade from PFF. I watched every snap of DJ Humphries, and while he did give up a few pressures, I believe PFF's count of 6 is too high. I'd say he allowed about 3, along with a couple of sacks. Keep in mind that Denver has an elite pass rush, and this game took place at Mile High Stadium. Plus, Humphries is still recovering from an ACL injury and a hamstring issue that had sidelined him for weeks. Given all that, and the fact he was playing next to rookie Kingsley Sua at left guard instead of Joe Toyne, one of the league's best guards, I think Humphries did well. The good news is his hamstring held up and he was able to shake off some rust. He should be ready for the playoffs, and there's a chance he could even start in the divisional round. The real question is whether the Chiefs will stick with DJ Humphries and Joe Toyne as their starting lineup moving forward. The big question for the Chiefs' offensive line heading into the playoffs is whether to go with DJ Humphries at left tackle and move Joe Toyne back to left guard, or to keep Toyne at left tackle and use Humphries as an emergency depth piece while bringing Mike Sendo back in at left guard. Personally, I think the Chiefs will opt to start Humphries at left tackle, as he did a decent job and could help improve the run game when paired with Twan at guard. However, I trust Andy Reid and the coaching staff to review the tape and go with the five best linemen available. If things start to go wrong, they could always move Twine back to left tackle and adjust as needed during the game. Now, I do have a small concern about Harrison Butker, though it's not a major worry. Since returning from injured reserve, he's missed a field goal or extra point in 3 of the 4 games he's played. He missed a field goal against the Browns, an extra point against the Steelers, and a 51-yard field goal attempt in the season finale against the Broncos. Not all of those misses were easy, as the extra point miss was backed up 15 yards due to a touchdown celebration penalty. But before going on IR, Butker was nearly perfect, hitting 19 of 20 extra points and 18 of 20 field goals, with 2 of those misses coming from 50-plus yards, including one from 57 over 60 yards. Since his return, though, things have looked shakier. I'm hoping it's just a fluke, and that with more reps and some rest in the next couple of weeks, Butker will return to his pre-surgery form. Lastly, I've seen some fans criticize Carson Wentz, calling him a bum or worthless, and suggesting the Chiefs should bring back Chad Henne. I'm sorry to break it to you, but Chad Henne retired. He's not coming back. I don't think the Chiefs wanted him to retire, but he was done playing. So now the team has to move forward. And in my opinion, Carson Wentz is a definite upgrade over Blaine Gabbert. That being said, he's still a backup in the NFL for a reason. Carson Wentz isn't going to perform like Patrick Mahomes, especially when he's working with an offensive line that hasn't played together before, up against a top 3 pass rush, and without key playmakers to throw to. On top of that, Wentz was clearly rusty, having not played in a game since preseason. However, I do believe he would look a lot better with the starting offensive line in front of him and weapons like Hollywood Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, and Travis Kelce to throw passes to. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about Wentz's performance moving forward. The best case scenario, though, is that we never see Wentz play again this season, because that would mean Patrick Mahomes is healthy, which obviously gives the Chiefs the best chance to win playoff games. Now let's address the ridiculous idea that the Chiefs intentionally threw this game just to eliminate the Cincinnati Bengals from the playoffs. The Broncos won big, which led to the Bengals' elimination, and they finished the season with the same 9-8 record as they did last year, this time with Joe Burrow at quarterback. But jokes aside, the real issue for the Bengals was their defense, which led to them firing their defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, today. Now, as for the Chiefs, there were tons of posts suggesting that the team was scared of the Bengals making it as the 7th seed, and that's why they rested their starters and threw the game. What's funny is that the Ravens, Bills, Texans, Eagles, and Rams all rested their starters over the weekend, but for some reason, only the Chiefs were accused of being afraid of the Bengals. The reality is that resting starters is a common move when playoff seeding is already locked in. Had the Bengals lost to the Steelers earlier on Saturday and been eliminated a day before, guess what? The Chiefs still would have rested their starters. Why? Because they had an early Week 6 bye and then played 3 games in 11 days from December 15th to December 25th. So, with the top seed locked up, this game was completely meaningless for the Chiefs, and their key starters desperately needed the rest. Honestly, I'm not too bothered by the Chiefs' 38-0 loss. Sure, it would have been nice to see their backup squad put up a better fight against a solid Denver team, especially since the Broncos needed the win to secure a playoff spot. But at the end of the day, Andy Reid isn't losing sleep over this result, and neither should we. Here's why. Back in 2004, when Reid was coaching the Eagles, they rested their starters in the final week of the regular season. What happened? They got blown out 38-10 by the Bengals? The situation this year was no different, yet some people are acting like it's a huge scandal. Don Vanetta Jr., a so-called investigative reporter at ESPN, went as far as calling it a low light of the NFL season and suggesting the Chiefs were trying to block the Bengals from the playoffs. But Reid's been doing this for years. This isn't new. He rested his starters in 2004, and now he's doing the same with the Chiefs. This wasn't about a secret strategy to sabotage anyone. It was about getting out of the game without injuries. The goal for the Chiefs was to ensure they stayed healthy and rested for the playoffs. Just look at how many teams are dealing with injuries heading into Wild Card weekend. The Ravens might be without Zay Flowers, and the Packers are worried about Christian Watson potentially tearing his ACL. In this league, injuries can happen in any game, and the Chiefs knew it was smart to rest up while they could. In fact, the only injury from the game was Shamari Connor, but Andy Reid confirmed after the game that it wasn't serious. The X-ray on his collarbone came back negative, and it seems to be more of a muscle issue. Now that the regular season is done, we can officially look ahead to the playoffs. The AFC playoff picture is set with the Chiefs sitting comfortably as the number one seed. The Broncos are the seventh seed, the Steelers are sixth, the Chargers are fifth, the Texans are fourth, and the Ravens and Bills round out the top three. Over in the NFC, the Packers are seventh, the Commanders are sixth, the Vikings are fifth, the Rams are fourth, the Buccaneers are third, the Eagles are second, and the Lions now have the top spot with a first-round bye, just like the Chiefs. The playoff games are set to kick off this weekend, starting with the Chargers traveling to Houston on Saturday, followed by the Steelers and Ravens on Saturday night. On Sunday, the Broncos take on the Bills, the Packers face the Eagles, and the Commanders will play the Buccaneers. Finally, the Vikings and Rams will face off on Monday evening. For the Chiefs, they'll play the lowest remaining seed in the divisional round after this weekend's games. So, the playoff excitement is just getting started. If things go according to plan, the Bills should most likely beat the Broncos in their playoff matchup. Of course, anything can happen in the unpredictable world of the NFL, especially with the single elimination format of the playoffs. But if the Bills take care of business and the Ravens beat the Steelers, along with the Chargers beating the Texans, the stage will be set for the Chiefs to play the Chargers in the divisional round. Now, divisional matchups are never easy, especially when it's a third encounter between two teams in the same season. The Chiefs have already beaten the Chargers twice this year, once in Week 4, 17-10, when the Chargers were banged up with injuries to key players like Justin Herbert and Derwin James, and again in Week 14, 19-17, when Matthew Wright kicked a 31-yard game-winning field goal for the Chiefs. A third victory would be tough, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility. We'll need to see how this week's games play out first to confirm which teams are heading into the next round, but we'll start preparing for what could be an exciting divisional matchup. As Chiefs fans, this is an exciting time, as the team is eyeing a potential third championship in a row, and is looking strong heading into the playoffs. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Chiefs' 38-0 loss to the Broncos, as well as your predictions for who the Chiefs will be facing in the divisional round. Until next time, let's go. How about those Chiefs?